the looming electrical power shortage. This is Steve Gottenham. On this slide, you can see some detail of his profile, but there is a point that I would like to pay attention of all the audience. One of his books has over 100,000 copies in print. Welcome to the podcast, Steve Gottenham.
Great to join you again, Armando.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you for coming. And this is me, only to make a registration here. Steve, some analysts say we face an imminent energy shortage in the US and other places in the world, but especially in the US. And you are saying the same thing in your articles and your speech. What type of shortage are you talking about?
Yeah, I think this is fairly recent, Armando. I'm a little behind some. I just had an article published in the Washington Examiner today on this topic. Some folks have beaten me by about a month, but
sorry to interrupt you. You sent to me some slides, so please ask to present here, okay, if you need.
Yeah, right. So this is just general information, but we are on the verge of a tremendous impact here with the United States electrical power grid. And I think it's going to be likely in a number of other nations, not all nations, that we're going to have a big electrical power shortage. Not necessarily blackouts, but just the fact that demand is going to be much bigger than supply, and it's going to drive up prices and do a number of other things. So if we get into this, you can show the first slide if you want.
Sure.
This is United States data. This is a pie chart of the U.S. electricity production in 2023, last year. And we got 43% of our electricity from natural gas power plants, 16% from coal, almost 19% from nuclear, wind about 10%, hydro about 6%, solar about 4%, and then some other. And we still have about 59% of our electricity that is coming from natural gas and coal. And those sources, of course, are the targets of the net zero plan, of the green energy plan. We've had many people, including President Biden, who wants to take our electricity production to 100% renewable by 2035. If you count nuclear as renewable, you'd still have to shut down 59% of our electricity. So the second slide, we have had a flat U.S. power demand for at least 2 decades now, at about 4.1 million gigawatt hours. It's been fairly flat, hasn't been growing. But there's a big change occurring now. And there are a number of things that are driving this. But during this period, the last 2 decades, we've closed about 200 coal plants in the United States. We've replaced much of that with natural gas. Wind and solar since 2000 has gone from about 1% to about 14% of our electricity output. But gas has gone from about 16% to 43% over that period, and coal has come down by about 60%. But now we have a bunch of big demand drivers that are occurring. And of course, some of these are obvious. The 2 of the 3 big green drivers are obvious. You can go on to the next slide if you want. The first demand driver is electric vehicles, of course. And this is a push pretty much across the world, certainly in Europe, Canada, the United States, Australia, other places. We have now 17 of the 50 states in the United States that have zero emissions vehicle mandates. That means cars need to be either electric or hydrogen by 2035. Hydrogen is not doing well at all, though. So the push is for electric vehicles. And our Environmental Protection Agency just passed a rule last month that is pushing for between 40 and 60% of electric vehicles, 40 to 60% of automobile sales to be electrics by 2030. And so if that does occur, that's going to be a big ramp in demand. There are a bunch of reasons why it may be slow to
Huh.
do that, but
But it relates to light vehicles, not for trucks and so.
yeah, this is light vehicles. Well, trucks is another thing. I'm not even going to. We've talked about trucks before on your previous shows. I won't talk about that much today, but
Yeah.
uh, just because it's almost an impossibility. It's a fantasy land that we're going to convert our trucking in the United States to be electric. There's just too many problems with it. But these other demand things are very, very big. So the next chart, demand driver number 2 is electric appliances. And again, we have cities and counties that are banning this. Much of this is in California. They're banning electric appliances in new construction. Much of this is in California. New York City has also banned construction of gas appliances. That's furnaces, water heaters, stoves in new construction. I don't think it's put into place now, but they've already set up executive orders to do this within a few years. And so
and this gas stove will be replaced by electrical ones.
yeah, that is the push to replace it with electric. And so in some places where we have cold winters, like New England, the 6 states of New England, the New England ISO, the independent system operator, which is responsible for electricity in New England, estimates that if we shift to electric appliances in all the homes, that demand shift will be bigger than putting all the vehicles to be electric in New England. So this is not a small item. It can be very big. Now, in many parts of the U.S. already, we do have heat pumps in the South, which makes sense. It doesn't get very cold, and they can compete pretty well. But in all the north part of the U.S., it would be a huge shift, and electric heat pumps really don't do the job very well. But nevertheless, we have many communities that are trying to force this on citizens, force a transition. This is going on in England. It's going on in Germany. A push for heat pumps. The British government had mandated a transition to heat pumps, but it's not going well. People don't want to do it, and it's very expensive comparatively. 10 or 20,000 pounds to do this. And so
you mentioned governments are doing these mandates. The society is the society agreeing with these decisions?
Well, I don't think so. As soon as they have to start paying money, they don't like to do it. In England, something like 80% of the homes use natural gas. In Netherlands, it's like 90%. So in these northern countries, it's a very high level of gas usage right now. But Netherlands has done the same thing. They want to disconnect 7 million homes by the year 2050 from gas lines, and they're going to try and put something else in there. And again, this is a push because of fear of man-made warming, and the idea that if we stop using gas and coal and gasoline and diesel fuel, that we will stop the planet from warming. The evidence for that is really, really very, very weak, as we've talked about before. But this is the plan. So, as I say, in the United States, in addition to shutting down 59% of our power, they want to convert to electric vehicles, convert to electric appliances. And then the third driver, which is the next chart, your audience may not know too much about that. Go ahead.
Is
the push for green hydrogen. And the reason here is that you can't use wind and solar in steel plants or chemical plants or those sorts of things. Most of them are using natural gas, except in China, which uses coal for the fuel for many of those plants. But so to bring those to net zero, they're saying, well, let's use hydrogen. Hydrogen, when it burns, produces only water vapor. It doesn't produce any carbon dioxide. So if they can switch to green hydrogen fuel, they think emissions will come down. The problem with that is there is no green hydrogen fuel industry today. It does not exist. There is hydrogen that is produced, but it's not a fuel that is distributed through pipelines or ships. It's produced on site by factories. For example, fertilizer plants that produce nitrogen fertilizer produce hydrogen, but they use natural gas or coal to do it as an element of the production process, so that they can come up with they produce ammonia from that. So we have about a million tons of 100 million tons of hydrogen that is produced today, but it's not green. It's all on site as part of a chemical process. But the world says, okay, let's produce green hydrogen. Now, to do that, the most widely used method isn't very wide today, but what's proposed is that we use electrolysis of water.
Mhm.
They would run electricity through water, split apart the hydrogen into oxygen, the water molecules into hydrogen and oxygen, capture the hydrogen, oxygen, use the hydrogen for hydrogen fuel. And if you produce that electricity using wind and solar, then it becomes green hydrogen.
Yeah.
There's a bunch
Yeah.
of problems with this.
This $5 per kilogram of hydrogen is equivalent to natural gas comparing energy capacity. Do you know these numbers?
I don't know those numbers offhand. The currently on-site hydrogen today costs about $1 a kilogram, one produced with natural gas. But if you use electrolysis, you need huge amounts of electricity. You need 50 to 55 kilowatt hours per kilogram produced. That's about twice as much electricity as in a U.S. home that uses in a day. And they want to produce in the United States. They want to produce billions of these kilograms.
So you spend more energy to create hydrogen with the content of energy than the hydrogen return.
Almost. I think it is the case for electricity. Some people have proposed we run electrical plants on green hydrogen as well, but you use a vast amount of electricity to produce the hydrogen, then you burn it in the power plant, and you don't really get a whole lot from it. So this is very, very expensive. This costs about $5 per kilogram. The other big problem with this is there's no way to transport this stuff. Today, hydrogen is transported in trucks, and it's very expensive. They either pressurize it to 700 atmospheres, which is about 300 times the pressure in an automobile tire, or they have to cool it to minus 350 degrees Celsius, which is only 20 degrees above absolute zero. Again, very, very expensive. So it's very hard to transport. We have no pipelines that can do this today. They've talked about putting hydrogen through natural gas pipelines, but hydrogen tends to degrade pipelines. There's a thing called hydrogen embrittlement. It's very reactive, and it attacks the metal in a pipeline. So you really cannot put much in there, much of a concentration. So we'd have to build whole new pipeline networks to transport hydrogen between places. And same thing when you try and put it on a ship, very expensive because it's got to be very, very cold. And so you lose energy by cooling it and then warming it up again. So this is going to be very, very difficult. But nevertheless, we have a lot of nations, Japan and India. Yeah, they're all talking about producing green hydrogen, a whole new industry. In any case, go ahead.
And Steve, there are some issues related to safety.
Yes.
Hydrogen is a very big problem that people relate.
That's absolutely. Safety. Yeah, if any of your viewers want to look at something ugly, look at the history of the hydrogen airships, the dirigibles. The world tried to build those from about 1905 until the last one blew up in 1937, the Hindenburg. And there were literally dozens of those airships that blew up and were destroyed, because if they have any kind of a minor leak, even something like static electricity can cause hydrogen to ignite. It ignites at a very low temperature level, very low energy. And there's some folks in England area talking about trying to run hydrogen to homes. I don't want that. That's a bad idea.
No.
So
bad idea.
but in any case, this is proposed by Europe and Japan and India. that we're going to create a green hydrogen industry so we can fuel steel plants and chemical plants. Again, if they do this, it'll be another tremendous demand on electricity, like electric vehicles, like electric appliances. And so again, you would see a big demand of electricity at the same time they're trying to shut down all of our hydrocarbon plants.
Mm-hmm.
And so the fourth thing, which is the biggest of all, the next slide,
Yeah.
is artificial intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
And this is just getting started, but it is a huge thing. So today we have data centers around the world. There are 2,700 data centers in the United States. There are about 220 in Canada. Those are the only two nations I know of. But these data centers have vast numbers of servers. You can see an image here of a data center. They cover 100,000 square feet or more, acres and acres of these servers that just do processing.
Mm-hmm.
And today these are used by Amazon and by Microsoft and by Alphabet to do processing for the internet and for banking applications. Well, in the last year, the world has said, wow, we can now do artificial intelligence. We can create servers and networks that think like people do. They can mimic the intelligence of humans. And so we have all these big companies that are spending huge amounts of money, first to build new data centers, and second, to upgrade the thousands of data centers that are out there with new high-speed AI cards. Now, these cards, when you upgrade a server, the new server uses 6 times to 10 times as much electricity as the old server did.
Mm-hmm.
And in the United, I think for the world now, it's about 2% of the world's electricity is in servers. In the United States, it's about 4%. But they're estimating, because of the AI growth, within 10 years, the demand in the US for servers is going to rise from 4% to over 20% of power demand. It's going to be a huge, huge increase. And this has caught our industries in the United States by surprise. Listen to this quote. Let's see, I'm looking for the gentleman. A guy by the name of Jason Shaw. He's chairman of the Georgia Public Service Commission. Mm-hmm. And he said, quote, "When you look at the numbers, it is staggering. It makes you scratch your head and wonder how we ended up in this situation. How were the projections," and he means for electricity, "that far off? This has created a challenge like we've never seen before." So in the United States, in Virginia, in Georgia, in New York, in California, in Washington State, there's going to be a tremendous demand for electricity. And this is going to be, we've had flat growth for 20 years. This is going to boost growth way up. And it's going to be very, very hard to meet.
Steve, most of these data centers are located in the US or some in neighbors countries, friend neighbors countries like Mexico?
Yeah, I need to do a little more research on that, but I think they're probably in Europe. I know that Germany's doing a bunch of this. I think Ireland has a lot of international companies. I need to do more research on this to see what extent outside of the U.S. this is going to be a big deal. Mm-hmm. But if the world is, and certainly Europe is pursuing the first 3 paths, which are electric vehicles, electric home appliances, and they also want to make a lot of green hydrogen. So they got big demand from there. If they're going to add artificial intelligence to that, it's just going to be much, much bigger than they can produce. By the way, Europe has had kind of an electricity shortage. They're building 25 new liquefied natural gas receiving ports or receiving terminals. The U.S. has been shipping liquefied natural gas for the last 2 years. Last year, we kept the lights on, not this last winter, but the one before in Europe. And they're getting gas from Oman and from the U.S. So if they want to do AI as well, it's going to be a big, big electricity demand as well.
But we could consider that the current U.S. government is with some restrictions to export LNG, to Europe.
Well, sort of. Yeah, right. Mr. Biden put in a halt to new licenses. We already have a bunch of plants that are growing and expanding, though, and so I don't think it's an immediate short-term issue. I
Mhm.
just spoke in Pennsylvania last week to the Pennsylvania Independent Oil and Gas Association, and we have a problem in the U.S. now that the price of natural gas is very, very low. It's
Mhm.
down below where people can make a profit at. There's so much gas being produced, and in Pennsylvania they have trouble getting it to market. So I think the price now is about $2.50 per.
Million BTU.
I think it's 1,000 cubic feet. It's probably a million BTU.
Yeah.
But in Pennsylvania, it's down. It's under $2. It's about $1.50. So they really need a gas terminal on the Delaware River there and a pipeline to it so that they could export it as well. They don't have that right now.
Mhm.
Uh, but this
So
is what's going on. So what are the impacts here? Let's talk about nuclear for a second. Next slide.
this is a good point. This is a good. Let me make some
Yeah,
comments before we
yeah,
go.
far away.
Is the nuclear is somewhat let's say rejected by society
Yes.
because it's wrongly associated to accidents and to contamination. But you see nuclear coming stronger to this play, to this game, to let's say to replace this demand for this four drivers you mentioned: artificial
Yeah, well, we're
intelligence.
starting we're starting to see that. You're right. There are 437 nuclear plants in the world today. Uh, it actually peaked in about 1990. The percentage of it was about 17% of world electricity was nuclear. Now it's about 10%. But it's still a pretty big share. In the United States, it's about 19% of our power. But we now see people are extending it. We've had the Diablo Canyon plant in California was going to be shut down next year. That's now been extended. We had a pretty big plant, nuclear plant in Western Michigan called the Palisades plant. That was shut down in 2022, but now the U.S. government is giving a loan of $1.5 billion to Michigan to restart that plant. And we see some places in Europe too where nuclear is being restarted. I think Italy, Sweden is talking about it, and some other places. Now, the problem we have in the U.S. is that a lot of our nuclear plants are getting pretty old. We have 94 plants that are operating, 10 less than about 20 years ago. We've closed 10 plants. We've only built 4 new plants. So 90 of our 94 plants were built between 1970 and 1980, roughly, in the U.S. Now, the good news is nuclear plants can, if they're renewed, they can run at least 60 years or so. But we now have 16 plants that are 50 years and older. We have another 38 that are 40 years and older. So these are getting older as well, and they're going to need to be replaced here in the next couple decades or refurbished. Just another problem with this whole idea of trying to make supply keep up with demand in the U.S. at least.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. You have a picture about nuclear.
Yeah. Did I give
Oh,
it to you? There it is.
oh yes, there's one.
Yeah, that's the
Yeah,
age
perfect.
age of the nuclear plants. You can see that 90 of them are 30 years or more older, and we've only built 4 in the last 20 years. So
And
it's been
takes
pretty
time
slow.
to construct, and
It
takes a long
does.
time to construct. How long is that? 6 years or something like that.
Well, it can be a decade. I mean, the new
Wow.
plants in Georgia have taken a decade and they cost $30 billion. Now, the good news is there are about 50 companies that are working on small nuclear plants and on a thing they call molten salt reactors, which use a lithium that works with uranium to produce nuclear energy. I think there's some hope for some of those. They need to get the cost of nuclear down. That's really a big issue with nuclear today is the cost. Natural gas plants are about 1/5 the price or less. Now I'm hoping some of those new. I saw a guy at a conference I spoke at who is working in Denmark on some new lithium salt reactors and claims they're going to be much cheaper. So we hope those will come along and help to meet this problem with a shortage of electrical power that we may be facing around the world.
Yeah. It's interesting because France is the strongest country in terms of nuclear energy.
Yes, in a percentage, and in Europe as well. But they've been having some trouble with maintenance. I think a lot of their plants have been
Yeah.
down the last couple of years, so they need to get that together. So what are the impacts? The next slide kind of summarizes it.
Yeah, sure.
So we have again, the Green Movement wants to shut down 50%, 59% of the electricity plants in the U.S. And at the same time, they want to boost demand, shift to electric vehicles, shift to electric appliances, green hydrogen from electrolysis, and then we have artificial intelligence growth. That is not going to happen. So what's going to occur is the first thing that's going to happen is they're going to stop shutting down the coal and gas plants and stop shutting down nuclear plants. Those are going to be extended in the United States. We'll have to see what happens in Europe, although I know Germany had restarted a number of coal plants when they got into problems with the shortage of gas. But you just can't go do all these other electric things. This isn't rocket science. You can't do all of these without being able to boost output, and shutting down most of our power is not going to be a good solution.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The second thing is that the price is going to go up, I'm projecting, for electricity. And that's because I think the folks that are building the data centers, they're going to get very big contracts, and the utilities are going to say, hey, we got to supply these guys. And that means I think it's going to be more expensive for people in homes. Their prices are going to go up because they're going to demand electricity, and we're going to have a bit of a shortage. And so this rise in price is going to be bad news for electric vehicles. It's going to be bad news for charging companies that are trying to break even with EV chargers. It's going to be bad news for heat pumps because they're going to have trouble breaking, coming close to the cost of gas. And then I think green hydrogen just isn't going to occur. It's just going to be too expensive. And so this has the potential. This electrical power shortage has a potential to derail the net zero energy transition around the world, especially for electrical power. We'll just have to see how this happens, but I think this is going to be a big impact.
Considering the impact, residential, commercial, industrial, who of these ones could be more affected by this high prices and shortage?
Again, I think the heat pumps for residential are number one. I think the charging companies are going to have trouble because they're going to be paying a lot for electricity. The EV charger companies, and they're already having trouble breaking even in most nations, I believe. It's just it's very expensive to put them in and to put transformers in and then try and break even. Most of the studies say it's very, very difficult. And then people prefer to charge at home rather than in public anyway. So, I want to go charge there 1 out of 5 times in public. Well, that doesn't do much for the business of the chargers. And then green hydrogen is going to be impacted. I don't think they're ever going to get close to the cost of hydrogen from natural gas.
Great. And in terms of World Health Organization, that they recently was saying that let's ban meat and dairy products. And my question for you, who will tell the lions in the jungle?
Yeah, this just shocked me. This was just a couple months ago. They proposed that we have a global meat consumption ban by 2025. That's next year. And if you look at the history with meat consumption is rising in every nation of the world except India. It's up by a factor of 4 in Brazil. Each person is eating 4 times as much meat as they were in 1960.
Yep.
It's up by a factor of 5 in Japan. And in China, every person is eating 16 times more meat than they were 50 years ago or 60 years ago, 1960.
My gosh.
And so this is what people do when they get wealthier. They stop eating so many beans and peas and they eat more meat. The World Health Organization, in my mind, is just, I don't think people are going to accept this. It's just beyond anything that's reasonable. And again, they're supposed to be a health organization. The reason they're pushing this, if you read the articles, this is to help stop global warming. This isn't for people's health.
Oh, you have a picture here. Yeah, it's impressive. United States growing more than 100, 110 is a kilogram per person. Yeah, per year.
Yeah, kilograms per person per year. U.S.
Oh,
hasn't gone up that
Brazil
much.
is in the second place. Oh,
How about that? Brazil's in second place. Well, you have a lot of cattle down there and a lot of meat as well.
this number's impressive.
But
Great
these numbers
numbers.
came from the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization. So I try to use all these recognized sources. But we have a bunch of things going on. Europe's farmers were successful. They and here's the next slide. If you've
Sure.
I'm trying to see where you are here. I've lost track of my viewer here. So yeah, they started blocking all the intersections in the major cities in Germany and in France and in Netherlands, and the European Union has said, okay, we're going to take out all the. They were pushing to reduce dairy herds, or to reduce the use of nitrogen fertilizer, and farmers said, hey, we're not going to reduce our dairy herds. We're not going to do that, and so they were successful. The European Union dropped their proposals for agricultural restrictions. And we'll see now there's an election coming up in June or July. And it appears that a lot of the more conservative people are going to get elected in Europe, which is going to put a lot of pressure on Europe to stop doing some of these things for agriculture. So I think people are kind of pushing back against a lot of this goofy climate stuff.
Yeah, and all these things together cause inflation, cause high prices, and with the wage keeping almost in the same level. How do you see this pressure for inflation?
Yeah, this was a study that was done, published in Communications and Earth Environment in March, and claiming that increasing global average temperatures are boosting up the prices of food around the world and causing inflation. Climate causes everything, right? It causes inflation, causes. The problem with this is it's really not supported in any evidence. If you look at the price of grains, for example.
Do you have a slide for that? No.
Well, I don't have one on price, but I've got one on the rise in corn, rice, and wheat production. If you've got that one.
Oh yeah.
It's down a slide or two, but many people thought we were going to have overpopulation and millions of people die, but the world egg industry was able to boost production much faster than population rose, and so we've had a tremendous growth. And if you look at the inflation-adjusted price of grains, I believe they've actually fallen over the last 50 years. So a number of these studies that global warming is going to cause inflation, they're really projections. They're not based on any data. By the way, we have had a temperature rise since about 1960, and we've had all this tremendous increase in corn, rice, and wheat, and many other agricultural products. So it's just another thing that you read in the press. If you read something about climate, it's probably not correct, and that's just another one of these. This idea that global warming is causing inflation.
You have a picture here that's. Oh yeah, this was you were talking just now. Yeah, rice with corn, increasing price. Oh, it's a production in the vertical axis.
It's production or consumption. They're roughly the same, right?
Yeah, perfect. And in your book, you said that we are going to a green collapse. My question for you is it a bit alarmist? What do you have against the green energy?
Well, I try to be a realist. I'm not really against wind or solar, but we have so many people saying that we must go to net zero. We must get rid of coal, oil, natural gas, and these things just are not going to occur. We're not going to get to net zero. We're not even going to get close to anything resembling net zero. We just use too much hydrocarbons, and now with this electricity shortage, there's going to be more and more pressure to keep all the traditional plants around and not shut them down. It's just not going to be possible to do. We're going to create electricity blackouts and higher prices to the extent that we do those things. So this is just another big huge lead ball that's going to fall on the net zero revolution here. And your listeners, if they watch the press, are going to see this roll out over the next year or two. There's going to be no more closure of these plants in many nations.
Uh, so green energy means higher energy prices, electricity blackouts,
Yep.
less freedom. Less freedom. Why less freedom?
Well, that's because they're saying you can't drive an electric car.
Oh,
They're trying in the United States, for example, the EPA regulations are trying to force the automakers to produce fewer and fewer gasoline cars or diesel cars, and so that's all people will have to buy is the electrics. And then as I said, in a number of states and cities and counties, they are trying to stop natural gas in new construction. So that means less freedom. That means you don't have a choice. We even had recently the restaurant owners of California sued the city of Berkeley because they wanted to cook with gas, and they won. The the appellate court pointed out that a Berkeley ban on natural gas in new construction violates a 1975 federal energy law in the United States. And so we have people that live real lives and do real things pushing back against these mandates. So these things are going to be stopped in their tracks. There's another indication too, if you want to go on to the next slide.
Yeah, sure. But before we go to the next slide,
Sure.
transnational energy shocks. What does it mean exactly?
Transnational energy shocks. Well, that happened in Europe. So the problem with these intermittent renewables is you can't turn them up if you have a problem. If you have a heat wave and you need air conditioning, or you have a cold snap and you need heat over a wide area, or if you have an embargo or you have a war like they've had with the Ukraine situation, you can't turn up the wind and solar. So this happens all the time with nations in Europe over the last couple of years. They had a continent-wide problem. Electricity went up by a factor of 6, natural gas went up by a factor of 5, and it's caused a lot of their industry to shut down or move overseas. They're getting some of that back under control now. The prices have come down, but if you're dependent on renewables, this is what's likely to happen. And so we're going to see this problem more and more. By the way, Australia is one of those potentials. Australia has no nuclear plants. They only get 6% of electricity from hydro, and they get just about everything from coal and natural gas. There's a little bit of wind in there, about 20%. But if they start shutting down those coal and natural gas plants, they're going to be subject to huge energy shocks again. And again, you can't turn up the wind to solve that sort of a problem.
Okay. Going to the is related to the CEO of Hertz.
Yeah, this is a sign of the green breakdown. So the CEO of Hertz, his name was Stephen Scher. He committed to buy 100,000 Tesla EVs and over 100,000 GM electric vehicles, and that turned out to be a disaster. They only bought 60,000, and then the first thing they found is that people didn't really want to rent them. Even folks that owned EVs at home, where they could charge in their garage, they liked that. But when they traveled, they didn't want to mess around with trying to use a public charger. And so the demand was very, very low. And then they found that their repairs cost twice as much. If an EV gets in a collision and the battery is bumped in any way, you got to replace the whole battery, which can be, a up to a $20,000 charge. And then the third thing was, last year we had a debacle in the U.S. for used electric vehicles. The prices of used EVs dropped 30% in 1 year in the United States. They couldn't hardly give them away. And so Hertz is in the used car business. They buy new cars, they rent them for a couple of years, and then they sell them. So they're in the used car business. And so
Yeah.
they had to take a loss. I think it was $247 million in the fourth quarter and another $140 million in the first quarter. And these were write-downs on the value of their electric vehicle fleet. They had to write them down from a financial point of view. And so they suffered big, big losses. But it's just been a big black eye for electric vehicles in the United States. And just another sign that we're not going to get everybody driving electric vehicles, and there are a number of problems. We're going to have a mixed future of renewables and hydrocarbon and gasoline systems.
Before we go to ask you about your books, where we can find, let me show you some important information. International Energy Agency is saying that EV sales will grow strongly this year. How do you see the
Yeah,
information?
I think this is a projection that's a little off. So last year, about 16% of the world light vehicles were electric vehicles. It was just under 9% in the United States, but they hit a speed bump the same year. Electric vehicle sales fell in California and in Germany for the first time. In the first quarter in the United States, EVs lost share of the US car market for the first time. They only took about 7%, and they were about 8.5 or 9 last fall. And so we see these things changing, and I think in Europe we're going to have they're going to have similar problems. And again, I'm not against electric vehicles. A lot of people like them for second cars. They're really cool. They got fast pickup, but there's just some applications, cold climates, and if you're in a apartment or condo, it's hard to charge, that sort of thing. So this idea that we got to force them on everybody to stop the oceans from rising, that's where we've really gone off base.
How many books have you written? And
I've written 4.
4. And where can be where are they available?
Yeah, the last 3 are available as ebooks, and this is including the Green Breakdown. They're available on ebooks. They're available on Amazon. They can get all 4 of them from my site, Steve Gorham, GOREHAM.com. I'll send them signed copies. Yep. But these are fun. They're color paperbacks. They got 150 color sidebars. For example, in Green Breakdown, we talked about beef. There's some sidebars about the UN wanting people to eat insects. There's a sidebar about one guy who's a professor in Sweden that says we should all eat human flesh to stop global warming. And so there's a lot of fun stuff in them, as well as all the information. So people need to get these copies and ask the tough questions of their leaders. So why are we really doing this? Why do you want to raise our energy prices? Those sorts of things.
And can find you in this. Let me show you here in your website.
Yep, SteveGorham.com. And I also speak to many, many groups in industries as well. So
perfect. Steve Gorham, thank you so much. It was a pleasure having you in this.
Great to join you again, and we'll have to find out what Brazil's going to do with a lot of hydrocarbon there, but
the second consumer for meat is very important.
Yeah. Okay.
Have a good day. Bye bye.